Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Friday, August 16th, 2024. I've been doing a countdown of my favorite video games of all time through each day of the year, and coming in at number 139 is Animal Crossing. Okay, before I get into the actual game here, I want to mention that if you like these videos, I announced a Patreon at the start of the month, and that goes live on September 1st. You can check out the info from the announcement video in the description below so you can make your own rankings and maybe even tell me how wrong I am in a ton of future videos. On to the game. Animal Crossing holds a special place in my heart, and this is the second game I'll be talking about from the franchise on my channel since I ranked Animal Crossing New Horizons quite early in the year as my 322nd favorite game. I should mention that this is also the last Animal Crossing game on my list, even though I've played at least a bit of Wild World, City Folk, and New Leaf. However, with those, I just played some of my friends' games for an hour or two, and while I was impressed by those games, especially New Leaf, I did not buy them. There's that. That being said, based on everything I've seen, played, and read, the GameCube title is still, I think, the best. For the sake of simplicity, and due to having more complete knowledge of the systems for both, all of my comparisons will be between the GameCube version, which I'll refer to as simply GameCube, and the Switch game, which I'm referring to as New Horizons. The game has the players as the only humans you ever run into in a world full of anthropomorphic villagers, and you're looking to build a new life. In this case, you move to a random town with absolutely no plan for lodging. The train god himself, Rover, in all of his Argyle glory, makes a phone call to his buddy, Tom Nook, to hook you up. Tom's got some residential developments that are quite empty, so he gives you one. Well, you owe him money for it, but there's no interest, so you could just not, if you want. Not only does he provide you with lodging, but he very temporarily gives you a job. Your responsibilities at work include putting up an advertisement, meeting your neighbors, and making deliveries. You work there for like an hour, and he pays you well, but you'll have to come up with the rest of the money on your own. Compared to a lot of the other titles of the franchise, progress in GameCube is extremely organic. Most of the core gameplay is similar to the other games. You run around, make friends, put together the contents of the museum, and make a life for yourself. Get a bunch of money, pay off your debt, get into more debt, pay that off, keep expanding your house. You know, the capitalist dream. Just have everything, all of the things, all of the time. Admittedly, there are some elements in this game that do show their age, like your town is split up across different acres that the camera needs to pan through as you move from acre to acre, which isn't as fluid as something like New Horizons, but it's honestly less intrusive to return to than I assumed it would be. It still holds up decently. It's just, if you're not expecting it, it'll be weird. However, while there's definitely some features missing from this game compared to its successors, there are things that aren't present in things like New Horizon, and I think they're a big deal. I'll start with some overlap that I think is better in the original, largely in its simplicity. One of my favorite things in Animal Crossing is the gyroids, which are little almost like pottery things that move and make sound, and they're cute, and they're weird and kooky, and they're great. If you have a ton of them, you can even set them up in your home to make music of a sort. In New Horizons, you have to first find gyroid fragments, then bury them and let them grow, and then you can dig them up after a set amount of time. Annoyingly, when you bury them, they just look like the buried fossils throughout the island at that point, meaning I frequently would forget I buried gyroids there and dig them up too early. In GameCube, however, they still look like fossil locations, but that's because that's how you find them. There's no hoops to jump through, there's no fragments, there's no waiting, you just dig it up, and you have it. That's it. And you can put them in your house. Much of the game's strengths are in similar amounts of simplicity. A lot of New Horizons feels like a list of chores to do, where in GameCube I feel more comfortable just running around doing whatever. at least for the day-to-day. Yes, there's still things I want to do every day, like look for fossils and check the store, but I don't feel compelled to check in on all of my neighbors and give them all gifts every single day. Don't get me wrong, you're still incentivized to talk to them, and definitely to try doing errands for them, which gives you little rewards. I actually quite like my villager assortment in this new file for GameCube. My favorites of the bunch are definitely Murphy, a very angry green bear that's generally just like a jerk to me, but in a kind of funny, endearing way. And then Barbara, she's a sheep. She calls me darling. Lastly, there's Cube, and he works on many levels. For starters, his initial shirt is a GameCube shirt, so that's obvious. But also, he's a penguin, and his catchphrase is dude, as if he's shivering. It's Ice Cube. But don't get too attached to your neighbors, especially if you visit another town. Visiting another town in GameCube is kind of fun, and while it is a slow process, which is something I absolutely ragged on New Horizons for, there's some elements to GameCube that make it endearing. Maybe it's nostalgia and rose-colored glasses, but whatever, I still like it. First, you cannot connect online, which you could certainly argue is a downside, but there is a component to this that is fun. In order to visit another town, that town's memory card needs to be in the second memory card slot of your GameCube. Almost by default, this means that the person whose town you're visiting is sitting next to you and you're going to have good times together, and that's worth a lot to me. Go to the train station and say you want to travel. There's a monkey there and he's got a little hat and he's an adorable little guy and he goes ook ook, and I like the train guy. You'll save your game and hop on the train where you meet Rover again. Well, usually you meet Rover. If you travel a bunch, sometimes you run into other weirdos on the train, which is fun for a change of pace, but assuming it's Rover, you get to catch up and have a little conversation as you make your way to the other town. Once the train arrives, you hop off and you're in the new town. It still takes a while, and though I didn't time it, I suspect it even takes longer than navigating through New Horizons' absurdly excessive amount of menus and friend codes and cutscenes and general Nintendo Online clunkiness, but it's actually an enjoyable experience in GameCube that I look forward to each time I travel, which is admittedly not often. The downside is that when you visit a town, apparently, so do your neighbors. I went to my sister-in-law's town, and then immediately afterwards, so did Cube. I should burn that town to the ground. Instead of commit arson on the other town, check out their store. And if you know they've done stuff with it, check out the player shop options. In GameCube, there's a few ways for players to put things on display for others to buy, even people visiting their island. This really works well for households that have people not home at the same time, because it's a great way to get items to each other that's all done thematically in-universe. I mentioned I love gyroids. Well, each house has a gyroid assistant outside of it that does a large amount of things, most often just saving. But you can also display items for sale. Back when this game came out and my brothers and I were all playing it religiously, we generally did not just give each other stuff. If I got something I knew one of my brothers wanted, it went in my gyroid and they could buy it if they really wanted it. Of course, we weren't total jerks about it. If I knew my brother wanted a log table, for example, and the store in town had it, I would just leave it for him and let him buy it and let him know it was there. I'm not going to buy it and then flip it. Don't do that. The other player economy aspect is the clothing store, Able Sisters. While in most games this is an actual store that had rotating inventory for clothing to buy, in GameCube it really was just a sewing shop. You could make your own designs if you wanted, and if you have the Game Boy Advance link cable, you could even load a thing into that, unplug it, and build your designs remotely on the Game Boy Advance, then plug it back in and upload them. That was really cool if you wanted to do that. I did not care about doing that, but if you did, you could put your designs up for sale in the store for others to purchase, which is cool. I do want to take a moment to mention there are things I like more about New Horizons. It's not all just bad. The larger storage is great, but still crafting should be doable from storage, and I will die on that hill. The graphics are obviously significantly better, and the villagers have more unique events and dialogue. The biggest thing New Horizons has going for it, however, is the Nook Miles system and the Happy Home Paradise expansion, which I still think should have just been in the base game. The main reason I didn't give them a pass for it being an expansion is that there's loads of stuff in GameCube that are totally absent in New Horizons, and some of them, in the other titles too. For starters, the long-term progression of your island in New Horizons is severely lacking compared to the towns in GameCube. Yes, you can landscape and do all of the customization of the world, but there's not really any story there. It's just a thing to do for the sake of doing things. In GameCube, there's a story revolving around Tom Nook's rise to, let's call it power? When you first get there, his store is called Nook's Cranny, and it's a glorified shack. I mean, this place is a hole-in-the-wall business that I can't believe he had houses to give you. As you spend money there or sell him things that he presumably sells to make more money, you'll slowly upgrade his shop. Some of this is time-gated, and there's even other requirements along the way too. Initially, as Nook's Cranny, his hours are more limited. He opens later in the day and closes sooner. But the first upgrade gets you Nook and Go, which basically upgrades him to a convenience store, including convenience store hours, that also sells wallpaper, flooring, furniture, but still a convenience store. After that, it upgrades to Nookway, turning into a full-on supermarket, selling way more things. The last upgrade takes quite a lot to get there, but it's super worth it. You get Nookingtons, a multi-floor department store with an escalator. In order to upgrade to it, not only do you need to buy and sell a ton of stuff, but you also need to have had someone from another town visit yours and buy something from Nook's store. So you have this story being built up as you progressively improve his business and all of the things it brings to your town. But not only that, you need to get other people involved, and it's this whole group collaborative effort, and it's really great to have that payoff. By the time you're at Nookington's, and maybe sooner, but I don't actually remember, you'll even be able to buy art there to put into the museum. There's a bit more involving the story you'll discover along the way too, like the raffle system. Every time you buy a limited stock item, you get a raffle ticket for that month. If you save them up, and on the last day of the month go to Nook's shop, you'll find something interesting. Instead of being able to buy things, there will be some really rare items available that you can't normally get, and you spend 5 tickets at a time to draw a ball to maybe get something. What makes it even more interesting is that these items and their availability are not character specific. Have a town with 3 people, such as myself and my brothers growing up? Well, we were going to have to fight over those raffle items. That meant that I'd try to buy as many things as I could every single day from Nook's shop, so I could hoard all of the tickets and maximize my chances at getting the prizes at the end of the month. Notably, this is one of the few ways you can get NES games. Yes, NES games, like the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Famicom, the OG. There's 17 titles available in the game, and each one requires its own system. I set up an entire room in my house back in the day that was just the NES game room. You know Donkey Kong? Like original Donkey Kong, first game with Mario? Ranked number 247 on my list. I was aware of its existence already, of course, but playing it in Animal Crossing was my first actual experience with it. Same with several other classics like Excitebike, which in hindsight probably could have made my rankings instead of like Hey You Pikachu or something. But that's not the only cool thematic thing I threw in a room. Another room I had in my house was the town. On special holidays, you can head to the Wishing Well, which I'll explain in a moment, and see Tortimer. He's an adorable little old turtle man, and he's the mayor. He's normally too busy to be out fraternizing with the locals, but he's actually a very goofy, fun-loving dude. If you go see him on holidays, you'll get an item that's a miniature diorama of something in the game, usually a building or something. They're a lot of fun to collect, and it's something to keep you coming back to it, at least for the holidays, for a very long time. The holidays themselves are a lot of fun too, like Halloween here, which has a trick-or-treating component and doesn't feel like just a rush to get crafting materials to make limited time things. I feel like I'm really interacting with the town in meaningful ways, even if they trick me. there's still loads of other random events throughout the year, not just the major holidays. Like Gulliver can wash up on your shore and give you something from his travels, or Sahara shows up to sell you exotic carpets, or your former neighbors like Cube, that backstabbing, betraying... Excuse me. It's exciting to see some friendly faces. A lot of those events are announced on the bulletin board in the middle of your housing complex, and it's exciting when just random things like someone burying treasure is up there again, especially when you're sharing the town with other people. Being the first person up and on the system in the morning and checking that out is exciting to get first dibs. There's lots of other things in your town too that aren't present in New Horizons and some of the other titles. For starters, the post office is actually kind of fun and interesting, at least, a little bit. I mean, it's mostly just the post office, but you have 2 different people that are working the counter. In the mornings, there's a person who's very friendly and nice and welcoming, and they're pleasant to interact with. And then in the evenings, there's the person working night shift just hates you. They hate interacting with anybody, they hate their job, they don't want to be there, they clock in, they clock out, they get paid, don't ask them to do anything. And it's just all of this kind of charm and character that I think makes the town feel really interesting, whereas, again, not to just keep hammering on New Horizons, but it's the one I can talk about the most, besides this one. It just feels like, yeah, it's an island, you're there. But it doesn't really feel like it's a special island, if that makes sense. There's a lot of reasons to check in regularly on your town. From looking for perfect items to complete the look of your house, to time-limited events, to also just keeping the town looking nice. Just like in other titles, some of your tools can break. Your shovel will eventually break from hitting rocks. Your axe will eventually break from chopping trees. It's nowhere near as often as in New Horizons, but you also can't just craft them, and shop availability is more limited, so it does balance out. But as another means of progression throughout the game, you can get indestructible tools. I forgot to look up the methods for getting these until now, it's too late to record some, but each way is pretty cool. For the shovel, bury a fresh shovel in a hole from digging up money. It'll make a golden shovel tree. That's sick. For the fishing rod, it'll take a lot more time and patience. You need to catch one of every fish. Presumably, this is something you already want to do for the museum, but there's a little extra incentive for you. The golden net is the same, but for bugs. The axe, however, is the biggest grind. You need to maintain perfect town status for 15 days straight without any lapses. This is hard because what that entails is not actually clear. But for guidance each day, you can go to the wishing well and talk to the tree there. In addition to being indestructible, all but the axe have additional benefits too. The shovel can sometimes just dig up money in places without glowing spots. The net has a larger capture radius, making it easier to get bugs. The fishing rod not only casts faster, but fish react to it quicker as well, saving loads of time when you're fishing for stuff to sell. There's a lot to do with the GameCube. One thing I forgot to mention, there's a lot to do with the Game Boy Advance. They did not make an Animal Crossing Game Boy Advance game, but it is just part of this GameCube game. You can plug in the Game Boy Advance. I already mentioned the sewing shop, but you can also go to an island and you can run around as Animal Crossing on your Game Boy Advance, and that is the island. And it's very cute and it's very fun, and there's not a lot to do there. But it is something, and I think that effort is worth at least a little bit. But with all of this stuff to do in the GameCube, my brothers and I did it all. We finished the museum. We built Nookingtons. We fully upgraded all of our houses and furnished them to be our dream homes. We got all of the golden tools, and I'm pretty sure, between the 3 of us, we had complete catalogs. We spent, collectively, thousands of hours, and then we just kept going. There was nothing left to do, but the game was so charming and so fun that we just kept doing it, at least for a while longer. Eventually we moved on with our lives, but I'll always look back exceptionally fondly on my time with Animal Crossing with my brothers, in our own little town, in our own little world. tomorrow as I talk about my 137th favorite game where my princess is in another castle. Which castle is she in, Toad? Why won't you tell me? Who are you? You're not even an amphibian!